If the Bible's got you tied in knots, if you're burdened with religious thoughts, come grab a drink and join the choir. It's Heretic Happy Hour.
Well, hey everyone. Welcome to the Heretic Happy Hour. Oh my goodness, it is the first podcast of the new year. We are so excited. We've got some amazing shows planned for you guys coming up here. And we can't wait to jump into this one here as well. But again, real quickly, I'm going to do some introductions. My name is Keith Giles, and I am one of your hosts. I'm the author of Jesus Untangled, Crucifying Our Politics to Pledge Allegiance to the Lamb. And I am joined by my good buddies, Jamal and Matt. Hey, guys, say hi.
Hi, guys. I'm Jamal Javanji, author of Free to Love. And it's a pleasure to be with you guys in this new year.
And I'm Matt Distefano, author of 3 books and a 4th one coming out here on Quoir Publishing. It's actually going to be called Heretic. I think I've said that before. And I'm really excited about the new year and excited to dive in to this episode that we have for you guys. Keith, do you want to tell our listeners what we have coming up in the next couple episodes?
Yeah, I'll give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek if you're curious. In this new year, oh my gosh, we have so many great interviews and great guests coming on. One of the things we're going to do in the very next episode, so the one after this, so be looking forward to this. We're doing our next podcast is going to be on gender wars, and Amanda Iosa, is that how we say that name?
I think so. Yeah,
is going to be she's going to be our guest throughout the whole podcast, I think, right? She's going to stay and kind of be a...
Yeah, I think she's going to be our token woman guest. Isn't that right?
Oh, God.
Yeah, something like that. And our Heretic of the Week is Jory Micah, which we did this interview, gosh, it feels like years ago, but we're finally going to be able to share that with you. And so many other great things coming up. If I just start talking now, the whole podcast will be telling you all the cool things we're going to do in the future, but I'll stop. But good things are coming, guys. This is going to be, I think, even better year for the Heretic Happy Hour.
Yeah, but before we get into this episode, let's get a word from our sponsor, which is Unfundamentalist. They are a group focused on following Jesus' commandments to love God and neighbor, and is dedicated to opposing the toxic, power-mongering, fear-inflaming nonsense that is inherent in economic, political, societal, and religious fundamentalism. They are a blog.
Booyah.
Yeah, booyah. They're a blog that you can find at unfundamentalist.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/unfundamentalist. And love them. Jamal, do you have something to announce?
I do. And, I know it's Christmas has passed, but we still have gifts to give. And one of the gifts that we give to our listeners, and I don't know if everyone knows about this, but one of the gifts that we really pride ourselves in giving to the listeners is this thing called the Heretic Hotline. And here's the number. Let me just read the number before I forget it. It's 240 the number 3 heresy. So 2403 heresy. And you can call, you can actually leave voicemails, and you can also send text to that number, and we will be able to queue up those texts as well as the voicemails to share on the podcast. And speaking of queuing up text, we actually have a couple texts that I would love to read that came into the Heretic Hotline. So this is fantastic. It's one of my favorite things about the hotline is that we can communicate directly with people. And so and there's other means too. But so let me read those. It's the first text that we're queuing up here that came into the Heretic Hotline is this one. Absolutely love and appreciate your podcast, guys. A welcome breath of fresh air and fresh thinking every week for this millennial none and done seeker undergoing deconstruction for a more traditional evangelical upbringing. It gives me hope and encouragement that folks like me are not alone. The ones who no longer claim to have absolute, quote unquote, correct beliefs in certain propositional truths coming from an absolute authority. I cannot have certainty or agreement anymore, and that's okay. Wisdom, careful, conscientious thinking abounds, and that's as close to the way as I can get right now. Let this be an encouragement to you. Keep doing what you're doing. Right now, it's very hard for me to find a community, but this is a great place to start. And that's from Emily K. And so thank you so much, Emily. That's such a beautiful just a beautiful text. Thank you for that. And we really received that as an encouragement. So I'm so glad you're enjoying this podcast, and it's bringing you a lot of just answering some questions and just giving you a place to flesh out what you're going through. So it's beautiful. And we also have a second one.
Oh yeah.
Here's a second one that came into the Heretic hotline. Guys, put on your raincoats, because I'm going to gush. This podcast has brought so much joy into my life. I've waited over 40 years for this kind of clarity and freedom to just let God be whatever and whoever he is for everybody, not just for me and my ilk, assuming I actually have an ilk. I'd suggest building 3 tabernacles, one for Keith, one for Matt, one for Jamal, but that's been done. So that's awesome. Thank you for that, whoever that was. Really appreciate that text, and we definitely received the encouragement, and very glad that there's no tabernacles being built for us. But
yeah, I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah, but gosh, guys, I do want to say thank you so much, because it really does mean a lot to us to know that people appreciate what we're doing. And when we get texts like that, and some of us have gotten messages just on Facebook and in person like that, and here there was one from a millennial and one from someone in their 40s. Or more, at least, as they waited over 40 years, so maybe they're in their 50s. It's just great to know the kinds of people that we're touching, and to know that it does mean so much to so many people. That's what's, I think, blown us away, is, the 3 of us getting together to talk about theology and things you're not supposed to talk about has been such a blessing to so many people. So that's so great to hear. We're going to try to continue to bless you guys, and thank you for that. And so now it's time for the Heretic of the Week.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
Hey, I'm Derek Webb, and I'm a heretic.
Hi, Derek.
Hi, Derek.
Hey, how's it going? It's like a group therapy meeting.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, I say that, and everyone greets me. That's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Derek, hi. This is Jamal, and I don't know that if you remember me specifically. We've actually met. I used to live in Nashville a few years ago.
Okay.
I actually remember you. I was in a Krispy Kreme one time getting some donuts, and I think I saw you in there. The other time I saw you is actually I was in Waco, Texas, at this little coffee shop called Common Grounds, and you were
Sure.
playing.
Oh yeah, I've been there many times. I love that little shop.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to own that place, and Jill. So
I love Jill.
Yeah, so it's been a few years, but I've always appreciated your work. And I know you were part of Caedmon's Call. Is that right? Way back in the day.
I was. Yeah, we started the band in the early '90s, like '92.
That's right. And then you've obviously kind of transitioned off, obviously into your solo career. But I wanted to ask you this question. Obviously, I've appreciated your work, and you're pushing a lot of, you're really asking lots of great questions through your work, and that's gotten you in some trouble over the years. And I was just wanted to ask you, why do some people think you're a heretic?
I don't know. It's I feel like answers to questions like that are a little above my pay grade. Like I feel like my job as an artist is to look at the world and describe it. Like, look at the world and tell people what I see. That's any artist's job description. And what happens as a result of my doing that job, if I'm doing it well, is it's absolutely beyond my control. And it's a thing that I've just really never concerned myself too much with. So, I have always been just as pleased with people standing and clapping as people standing and leaving. I'm equally gratified in either. So I just like people paying attention and listening and using their brains. And so I don't feel like I've ever had any particular agenda of any kind about it or with it. But I have for sure found myself in hot water a few times over the years. But I just kind of all see it as the risks of the profession.
Mm-hmm. I really love that. I really love what you said there about just being okay with if people give you a standing ovation or walk away. I think that's true freedom right there.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of the craft of being an artist, and for me, has been to try and identify, discern, and then dismantle any filters, any internal filters that I have that would alter what my instincts of describing the world as I see it and what you might hear on a record. And in other words, to like kind of pre-filter it before it even has a chance to live or exist or mean anything to anybody. I've always kind of felt like my job is to, or part of the job that I'm doing, the internal work, is to find where those filters are, where are my fears about it, about the work, and how do I deal with and dismantle those filters and fears in order that the work can be as genuinely honest as possible, because it's only ultimately as effective or resonant as it is honest. And so that's really the fight,
I was going to say, do you think maybe you're too honest for some people?
That was my question.
I don't know that you can be too honest. It's like in the same way that there's no such thing as bad information. Right. I think that I can for sure be a bad match with somebody. I mean, our music and art is really important to people, and it's the providing of emotional soundtrack for people's lives. And I think that while we might have a scene together, I might not be the soundtrack for the whole film, for somebody. And I'm okay. I'm more than okay with that. I'm super happy for anyone to spend any season with me or be resonant for any amount of time. I'm really happy with that, and I'm okay with people leaving. Like it's more that people have a hard time, because they feel connected for a time, they have a hard time leaving, and what winds up happening, like they're not okay with you changing in ways different than the ways that they're changing. And in as far as people are not okay with that, and thanks in no small part to the internet, and all the strange opportunities that it affords us, folks mostly kind of stick around to watch the ship go down, and they stick around to did I say a curse word? To watch this. Boy, some little itchy trigger finger over there, a little trigger happy on the old. Don't worry, I'll give you plenty of opportunity, but that means I get a couple of freebies though from here. But people like they can't stop telling you that they're leaving, and they can't stop telling you why. Because intense criticism and intense judgment typically comes from intense love and intense connection and resonance. That's I'm only really mad at you too because I really love you too. And I know I have a sense of what I think they're capable of, and when I see them falling short of that, it makes me angry. But it's rooted in love, and I understand it. But I think that at any given point, a third of my audience are people who don't like me, ironically. Yeah. So
I love what you said, Derek, about you're okay with people leaving. It reminded me. Do you know who Seth Godin is?
Sure, of course.
Yeah, and he wrote this great book called Tribes, and he makes a very similar point to what you're saying, which I think is such a wise thing for everybody, whatever you're doing. If you're a writer, you're a musician, a painter, or whatever, even just a regular person in your life, to recognize your goal isn't to please everybody. And if you're trying to create a product or create a song or create a book that makes everybody happy, you're going to fail because you can't do that. And that you really don't want to do that. What you want to do is to attract people that listen to what you say or listen to your song or read your book or whatever, and they say, yes, that is exactly how I feel. That communicates exactly what I'm looking for. And those are the people you want to stick around. Why do you want people to hang out with you that really don't want to be there, right? No,
exactly. And that's what I've said to people. Like if the music that I'm making is not resonant or no longer resonant with you, please go find music that is. But don't feel but be free of me. Like go elsewhere. Like I'm okay with it. I'm going to be okay. You're going to be okay. But it's just funny, it's funny how that works. But, and if anything, I think art is so tricky too, because there is this strange kind of false intimacy that people have with, and it's not one-sided. I think that artists feel a certain relationship to their audience that is also kind of unrealistic and detached, just as the audience feels towards an artist. And because there's this false sense in which we feel like we know each other or know things about each other. And that's kind of true, but it's probably more not true than it is. And so it just makes the whole thing really complicated. And I think that the worst thing that an artist can do is really be concerned about pleasing anybody. I mean, I think of artists who I really love and trust, and I think, like self-indulgence gets such a bad rap, but I think as an idea, but I think when you're dealing with trustworthy artists, or good or even great artists, like the question you have to ask yourself is, who would you rather them indulge? Would you rather them indulge their fans or their the record label, the radio? All my favorite records wouldn't have been made if the artists were concerned what their fans thought. I'm thinking of records like Octoon Baby or Yankee Hotel Foxtrot or OK Computer, or like none of those bands' fans wanted those records. They all wanted the part two of the previous record. So like what you want is your favorite artists indulging only their own creative instincts. So I would never suggest to anyone to make art to please anyone, because you're right about that.
I think that's absolutely spot on. That's what I found. Derek, Matt here. You had mentioned earlier that some people get upset when you're not changing in the same way that they're changing, or perhaps not changing. Can you highlight maybe a couple of your changes, or one in particular, or two or three, or whatever you feel like, that kind of highlight your major changes? Because I'm assuming as an artist, you're always growing and you're always deconstructing, reconstructing things as you move. Can you maybe talk about a couple of those?
Yeah, so going back to the idea that, the job of an artist is to look at the world and describe it, that's tricky. That's tricky business, because being a professional autobiographer is tricky business because it's a job of 1,000 variables, because the world that you're observing is always changing. You observing it are always changing. You might document something, a specific idea or emotion in a particular moment, and then a year later, 2, 5, 10 years later, stand in that same spot and document it completely differently. Maybe not document it at all. You might frame it or focus it a completely different way, because both it and you have changed. And so it's like, so you just run this risk constantly. And if you're doing the job right, you should be. Not just artists who you listen to, but also your friends or even yourself. If you still agree with 100% of everything that you thought was right 5, 10, 20 years ago, then that means you haven't learned anything, and that means you're not growing, and I don't think that's healthy. So you have to expect that your perspective is going to change, and that's not a bad thing. But I think that when people connect with artists, and maybe when there's a particular moment in an artist's career, or a particular season or record or subject matter that was a particular point of resonance with you, then that tends to be the place where you kind of put it into park. But the artist is still in drive. And so, that might be what you want, what you're looking for, and that's where you want them to stay. And the thing is, you have it. We're documenting, so you have that record. You can keep listening to it, and if that's as far as we go, then that's fine. But that's what makes it tricky. So there's been more than a handful. When I left my old band, and started to kind of stretch my legs a little bit as a songwriter and really find my voice, and what I was writing on those early records was a little much for people. initially, and it was kind of, I think, spiritually disruptive a little bit to people, and then it got a little political around the second act with Mockingbird and the Ringing Bell, and that, and that I lost a lot of people there, and then beyond that, it moved on out into ethics and community and records like Stockholm Syndrome, and where it got more into race and sexuality, and I lost a lot of people there, and and then with the new record, Fingers Crossed, it's an autopsy, it's an observation of grief and detachment and deconstruction around spirituality and relationships, and that can be a lot for people, and that might be the point where the resonance runs out. And but the thing is, the same ethic produced all of these things. So I'm still just looking at the world, describing it just the same way that I did. The same process that produced all the Caedmon's Call songs also produced all my early records material, and has also produced Fingers Crossed. And so anyway, that's
right.
And that's why I trust it.
Yeah. Hey, Derek. First of all, this is Keith. I really love the new album, Fingers Crossed.
Thanks.
It's amazing. And man, just as someone who has listened to your records, so mostly to your solo stuff, I never listened to the Keedman Call stuff.
Yeah.
But really, I think Mockingbird is where I kind of picked up with you and just fell in love with your honesty and your bravery, your courage to kind of tell the truth in a world where a lot of people, like you said, probably weren't ready for what you wanted to say at the time. But Fingers Crossed is absolutely, it's a great record. It's a profound and powerful record, but it's also, I'll be honest, very hard to listen to in many ways.
It was hard to make. Yeah.
Because it's so honest. Yeah, I'm sure it was. So can you, is it okay if we talk about a couple of the actual songs?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
On the record?
Yeah.
And so just one of them I wanted to ask you about. What I love about what you're doing here, at least as I'm looking at through some of the lyrics on the album, it's this beautiful little dance, and I'm sure maybe some of it's intentional, where certain lines you don't know, is this song about God? Is this song about a relationship or a person, or both? But maybe it is both. But I think the song is "Love Is Not a Choice," and there's a line I wanted to ask you about. So it says, I'm just going to read it real quick. He says, you say, "Woke up and couldn't find you, couldn't find the children, a fuzzy head, blood on my clothes, and I could not remember if I had killed or saved you. I only knew I was alone. Oh my God, I came to just in time to watch it burn, gasoline on my hands, and a grave lesson learned." And then the chorus, "That love is not a choice, 'cause I've chosen not to love you anymore, and I don't have a voice that a heart can hear when a heart knows what it wants, so love is not a choice." Beautiful picture. I love the images in that. But my question was about if you feel comfortable talking about this, that the line about love is not a choice because I've chosen not to love you anymore. Can you just talk about that a little bit? I have an idea of what I think you mean, but I'd much rather hear your idea.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so I've kind of said that the album is a tale of two divorces, and which is exactly what it is, and your question speaks to that, and some of the lines are a little blurry on song to song, which I like ambiguity. I like it. It causes people to lean in a little further and listen a little closer and squint their eyes a little bit, and I like that because it pulls people in a little bit. I don't always do it on purpose, but I don't mind it when it happens. And on a song like that, I think even the second pre-chorus speaks to it pretty well too. If I can remember it, I think it's I've loved you for so long, and I love you today, but I don't know how long I can live in a house by your grave, because love is not a choice. And so the idea behind the song, I mean, it's certainly a song about my divorce, and it's a song about, it's a really, to me, it's a really complex, almost a feedback loop of wordplay, because it's the idea that hard as I have worked to fall out of love, it does not seem to be a thing I can will myself out of. It's not a thing I can apparently choose to do or not do. And I know that, and it's obviously also a play on words with everyone says, love is a choice. It's a choice you make. You wake up every day, it's a commitment. And I'm not really challenging that on the whole. I'm just saying there is a very real aspect in my experience of it that says to me, there are things about this that are just simply out of my control. And as much as I wish I could simply wake up and decide. And interestingly, the parallel works. I also wish that I could decide to inversely still be in love with the idea of a benevolent, intentional force in the universe, bringing all things under dominion and working all things out according to a plan. I wish I could still be in love with that idea also. But apparently love is not a choice. And so it's something along those lines.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say, because that's what I thought where you were leading. And I thought that was beautiful. I love that turn of the phrase. And you're right. It totally makes you dig a little deeper and pause and consider again, okay, what am I hearing? What is he saying here? And I love it. And I appreciate
you listening so carefully.
Yeah. Well, I'm a writer, so I'm a lyrics guy, man. I really dig
it. That's right.
So that's why I love your stuff. And and thanks. Easter egg is another one that I just thought, probably don't have time to go deep into it, but Easter egg is another one that just, again, great lines, great stuff just to really make you pause and consider it, what you're saying. And it is a fantastic record. I really encourage people to, especially if they followed you at all, to check it out. It's just really good stuff.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I would hope that people would, even if they find themselves on the other side of, it's not as is typical for me, but it has never been more so than on this record. It's not a record of conclusions. It's a record of questions. And I think that even if people find themselves on the other side of wherever they perceive me to be, that they would at least be resonant with the questions that are there. And I think that anyone has kind of eyed the off-ramp, whether they've taken it or not. And because life is hard and really difficult to process and make sense of, and to square with, with what you believe about the grid through which you're looking at it. Sometimes it's easily called into question. And so I would hope that people would at least be willing to see it as an honest emotional document. And that maybe be enough, but if it's not enough, at least to be open to resonating with the questions that are there. On some scale, I think we've probably all asked them. And so, but I really appreciate your saying so.
So can you, we want to wrap it up a little bit here, but before we go, I wanted you to talk a little bit, be sure, of course, to tell people where they can get the record. But I noticed on your website, which is it's just DerekWebb.com. But if they, on your website, you're doing something called the airing of grievances. And I don't think it's related to Festivus, but could you talk about that a little bit? Why are you doing that? What is that?
The airing of grief is the way I'm calling it. Because grievances sounds a little more like there's something to be angry about. But the airing of grief sounds like there's a little more real estate there for the process, and some sadness so first of all, if people want to hear the record, they can pretty much hear it wherever they go looking for it. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, it's on iTunes, it's on, it's all up on YouTube. You can purchase, CDs or vinyl from DerekWebb.com and all that sort of thing. So it's not hard to find. But as people were receiving it and listening to it, very quickly, I got a strong sense of reaction from it. And was just really overwhelmed with people using it as an opportunity to tell their stories or where they are or have been in proximity to great loss and grief, and around either a similar story in terms of the breakup of a marriage or the deconstruction of a spiritual worldview or whatever it is. And there was so much of it, and the least of it was what was public. But there's a lot there too. There's a lot on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and whatever, the places where people put those sort of things, log those sort of comments. But I also got just a pretty overwhelming amount of emails and direct messages from people and texts from friends, and what in having a handful of conversations with friends about what I was reading and observing, I realized that, this is like when you're in the church, when you're in an organized gathering of, around your worldview, it's like there's a community to do that with you, and it really must be done that way. And I think that, and my understanding of Christianity is that it really is a law unto itself in terms of the way that it is only to be practiced communally. There is no version of it that is non-communal. And the thing is, I kind of think maybe that's not unique to Christianity. I think that's how we are wired as humans, and like we're meant to do things together. And so for me, what's made me sad is that there seems to be this scattering of people when they go out of or deconstruct their way out of a spiritual worldview or a church environment, where suddenly we're expected to now do this all on our own, and to do it in isolation, and to be, and it's really hard. And I think it might be just as impossible as the other to do alone. And so I wanted to do whatever I could and play whatever role I could in helping bring those things into focus and providing a space for people to do that together. And so my thought was initially my thought was I just wanted to talk to people about it. I wanted people to have a chance to talk about how the record made them feel, and not it being about the record so much as it being what it stirred in their story, and why it was maybe particularly resonant, or why they were angry about it and what they were not particularly resonant with about it. I wanted to hear all of it. And so I decided to do this thing, the airing of grief, where people can schedule calls with me. And I've been doing hours. I do a couple hours of 10-minute phone calls every day. And I did about 8 today. I did about 8 yesterday. I do a few every day now.
Wow.
And I record them all. And with their permission. That's part of what you kind of agree to. And we just talk. I've already heard, just in the last 2 days, I've heard some devastating stories, but also some really hopeful stories of what people have found on the other side of reconstruction and things like that. And my aim is to compile by topic all of these conversations, and then to release them in episodes for people to listen to help get those conversations going, and for people to not feel so alone, because I think that what people are talking to me about on these calls, a lot of folks are going to find themselves somewhere in these questions and somewhere in these conversations. And then in addition, folks can write letters as well, which we're going to read and put with the calls, and we're going to compile it into maybe kind of half-hour episodes. I hate the word podcast. I mean, the world needs another podcast. Like, I need a hole in my head. Present company excluded. But I just don't feel like I've had anything meaningful to contribute to the podcast world. But that's not really what this is. I mean, it's going to be an episodic airing of grief. I mean, we're going to air it out, and we're going to air it literally on the internet. And so, yeah, and it feels like part of the record. I mean, every record has had, every one of my records has had something that's come after that has been part of the record that you could see as an extension, you could see as an amplification, you could see as a piece of marketing, you could see as a lot of ways, but something has always kind of a second piece of art has typically come up in the wake of every record I've made, and the airing of grief seems to be what's come up for Fingers Crossed, and it's been fascinating so far, and I can't wait to share it, with people.
Wow, that is killer, man.
I think that's fucking beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, very, very cool. Hey man,
Yeah,
we're out of time, I think, but
Sure.
I want to thank you so much, Derek, for coming on and talking with us and sharing what's been going on with you and with your music. And I love what you just said about using. So it isn't just about you, and it isn't even just about your songs, but like providing a space for some healing community and letting other people tell their stories. Man, the fact that you're willing just to spend time with people and talk with them like that is pretty
Absolutely.
fantastic. So
Absolutely.
that's
Well,
great.
thanks. I really appreciate it. And if folks want to schedule those times, I mean, they get snapped up pretty fast, but and I don't think there's any available right this minute, but I'm always making more available. And so if folks want to go to my website, which is not ironically at derekwebb.com, there's a link at the top that says the airing of grief, and you can click there and it walks you through it. There's an address to send letters, and there's also a place to schedule calls if there's spots available at any given time. So if folks want to do that, they certainly could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Derek.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure to talk to you guys. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
let's do it again.
Thank you,
sometime.
Derek. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What an interview. Derek Webb. Yeah. He's just this guy has been, I've followed him for a long time. Years ago, like I obviously kind of dabbled in Caedmon's Call a little bit. It's a long time ago, it was many years ago. So like, I didn't follow him too much in that, but his work after Caedmon's Call, when he was really pushing the envelope in the Christian music world, oh my gosh. I mean, like he got crucified, but like I have so much respect for this guy, and he's just continuing to live his life and do his work. So it was a fantastic interview. I'm so glad he was able to come on the Heretic Happy Hour, because I've really admired him from afar for many years.
Yeah, me too.
Right. And I was just introduced to him, so I feel blessed by that. I love what he said about, if people get up and walk away, it's cool. And if people love what he's doing, it's cool. Like to get to that place, man. Woo. Like that takes some maturity, and that takes, I think, a lot of life experiences and having to go through, excuse me, going through the fucking ringer,
Wow.
Yeah. I remember years ago, I don't remember how, it's been 7 years ago, but I have somewhere, I burned it to a CD. It was so good. There was an interview where Derek Webb and Donald Miller, the guy who wrote Blue Like Jazz, just did this conversation back and forth with each other about kind of like what we're talking about. And it was so good. Oh my gosh. And I'm glad I downloaded it, because it's gone now. So as far as I know, I haven't been able to find it again, but it's gold. I go back to that thing once in a while and just listen to some of the stuff they talked about. It was so good.
Yeah,
so yeah, I love Derek. Derek's awesome.
He really is. And one of the things I thought was really, that just jumped out at me from his interview was, he talked about creating like from this ethic. He like his music. He said he has one purpose, and that is to describe the world. I think his language was to describe the world as it is. And so when I heard that, I'm like, okay, what is he saying there? To describe the world as it is. He's like, oh, he's really basically saying reality. Like I want to like get what's real. Like what I'm here to do is to speak about reality. It totally reminds me of Jesus, by the way, when Jesus said, I am the way and the truth, and the word truth that's used in the Greek, it really means reality. It's like, I'm the reality and the life, in the sense, like, so we're talking about the way. It's a transcendent thing. He's like, look, before you can actually deal with life, you have to get real. It's like, just get real. So like we're, so much of Christianity, so much of the world, not just Christianity, but I will say Christianity, because I see it as a part of the world, or the world system of things, is built on total illusions, total fiction. And so like when you start to see things the way it really is, reality, like things get clearer. And obviously we're all moving. It's not like everyone's got a corner in the market, but once you get a glimpse of, it's like, I would call that a revelation, or whatever you want to call it. You get a glimpse of reality. You start like describing that. That's the goal, is to describe reality. And when he's done that, I loved what he said. He's like, each project, each subsequent album that he's done. So like he was in the Christian music world, and a lot of that is just total fake bullshit, whatever you want to say.
Yeah. I work in the industry. I can tell you. I know it.
It's amazing. So like he like started to like see through it, and not only see through it, but call it out. He obviously lost a lot of following, and each album that he's just speaking from the heart, speaking from reality. I just thought it was amazing that he said, my goal hasn't changed. I still have the same ethic, but that ethic has led to him losing his following over the years. Each album, he's lost more followers, and he's okay with it.
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just, I think that leads us perfectly into our topic of conversation, because it's like, how can, it seems to me that how can someone lose that much of a following? I think he said a third, maybe, right?
Well, yeah, he did. He said he's like, for him, a third of his audience opposes him.
Right.
And I just thought that was really interesting, because when it comes to like misunderstanding, like it's almost like it's irrelevant if people accept what you're saying or if they oppose what you're saying. It's like, it's actually irrelevant, not because you don't care. It's because that's not my job. My job is to just speak from the heart, to create. And my experience has been really, it's more, my personal experience has been like the people I'm talking to. I would say for me, it's been three-fourths of the people I'm talking to actually are opposed to what I'm saying at some form, either through like, okay, you're challenging their belief system. You're not like, then they're questioning, maybe they're reacting and they're pushing back, which is totally fine. I have no problem with that. I don't have any impatience for that. I can tolerate that. And even if I'm not going to change their mind, I may still push back or dialogue, not for really them, but for others that may be following the conversation. Yeah. But there is a portion of the people that oppose, like for Derek Webb, like if somebody walks out, it's like, that's not good. And it's not bad either. It's like recognizing like, no, everything is actually unfolding the way it should. We're all learning in the process. I have no attachment to if someone's following or someone's not following. But when it comes to, there's some people though, and this is the way it works. And they're not just disagreeing with you, and they're not just, hey, questioning like, hey, you're challenging my beliefs and I'm really trying to wrestle, like, what does this mean? And like, there are some people out here that they actually are opposed, like they are diametric. I would call it satanic. And I know it sounds harsh language, but the idea is like Satan means accuser, accuser of people, so it's like whenever there's the foundation is accusation, that's fundamentally different than someone who disagrees. That's fundamentally different than somebody who's trying to understand and just isn't grasping it or wants to have dialogue about that. Accusation is actually the Satan. It is the satanic element that goes on in the world. It brings out absolute evil in the people who participate in it. And you can get caught up in it really quickly. And it is when I see Jesus, like when I read the Gospels, I see him dialoguing with teachers and people who come to him, like Nicodemus, who doesn't understand, or maybe they have questions. I see him even dialoguing with like the lawyers who are like pushing back. Well, who's my neighbor? And talk, and so like that led into the parable about the Good Samaritan. So I see him doing that. But here's what I also see him doing. I see him totally and pretty brutally sometimes exposing the folks who are speaking the language of accusation and didn't shy away from it. Mm-hmm. And yes, of course, it's coming from anybody who speaks the language of accusation. People, I believe, are inherently good. I don't believe that people are evil. So like if they're using that language, it is coming from pain. It's coming from whatever. But he didn't pussyfoot with it. He didn't pass it. He didn't just play around with it as if it's like a noble in its source. He really exposed it as the evil that it is. And that's why I think there's maybe a great lead into our conversation today about the nature of accusation.
Going back to what Derek said, when you lose a third of your audience, or Jamal, you, 3/4 of your audience, it seems like when you touch a nerve so much that there is that spirit of accusation when that many people, unless you're just a complete asshole, which I don't think any of us really are. I don't think Derek is. But when you've touched a nerve in the religious community, we'll say that much, and that many people, and some horrible things have been said about us, just in what we do over the years. And Derek, I'm sure I read some articles, before we were doing Derek's interview to catch up with who he was, because like I said, I didn't really know him. Man, some pretty harsh things have been said that seem to be from this spirit, from this place of accusation, and some of them are overt, like the ones I've gotten, wolf in sheep's clothing. I've been accused of that. It's like really
false teaching.
When you accuse someone of a wolf in sheep's clothing, like the wolf puts on the sheep's clothing, there is intent there. It's like when you attach that intent to say what that is, like that's only from a spirit of accusation. And like you said, Jamal, that comes from the Satan, Hashatan. And there are some scholars who would debate back and forth that, maybe that means the executioner, not necessarily the accuser, or different definitions. But what we can see is behind this Satan, execution and accusation go hand in hand. Jesus said that Satan's a liar and a murderer from the beginning, so when you have this spirit of wolf in sheep's clothing or heretic or all this, you're just putting intent on people's action. Maybe we're just wrong, right? I mean, maybe the three of us are sitting around and we're wrong, but my goodness, like, don't assume the worst in someone, like we're out to deceive the multitudes and send them to hell forever. Like, give me a fucking break. Like that, when that's your jumping off place and you're just going to point that accusatory finger, my goodness. But then there's more subtle accusations as well, right? I mean, those are the overt ones, but we can get really accusatory really subtly, when we gossip, when we do these sort of things, when we ask closed-ended questions with implied intent behind it, seems to be more of a subtle form of accusation, but it seems to lead to more overt accusations, right? I don't know if that's been your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and here's one thing I noticed that it used to really confuse me. Genuinely, I'd be like, because I've had people who are not just internet acquaintances, but people that are my actual friends, like I know them and their family and their kids go to school with my kids. And I've had them online accuse me of stuff like this because they disagree with something I've said. And I'm like, what is going on, man? You know me. Where is this coming from? And so then I started noticing there's a verse in John 8:40, which I found really interesting, where Jesus is marveling at the same thing because he's telling people the truth and they want to kill him. Right. And he even says, he goes, but now you're trying to kill me, a man who is who's telling you the truth. And so then I realized, like, well, sometimes that is how people react, right? You tell them the truth, but that truth, they're not ready for it, or it scares them, or it angers them, or whatever. And so they lash back out at you with this kind of anger. And again, accusation becomes part of that. But I was reading this thing. I'm going to just share this real quick, and then I'll probably be done. But this is just something that as we were talking about this topic, it reminded me of. I listened to this podcast a couple of years ago, where they talked about something called naive realism, or it's a blind spot bias. And the point is that we all have this. It's not just like the three of us are the purveyors of truth, and people that can't handle it push back at us and call us names. But because we do the same thing. I do the same thing. I'm just going to go and admit it. I've also been a victim of this, where I've been the victim of this. But here's what they talk about. They actually start off with the joke by George Carlin, where he says, have you ever noticed how everyone who drives slower than you is an idiot, but everyone who drives faster than you is a maniac? And that joke,
it's so true.
But it's true, right? But that joke is the illustration of what we all do. In other words, we make ourselves. In other words, people who are like me are normal.
Right.
People who drive the way I do are sensible and normal. Even though, let's say, maybe that's 80 miles an hour, doesn't matter. That's normal. I'll justify why I drive 80 miles an hour. And someone who's slower than me is an idiot, and someone who's faster than me is a maniac, because I make myself the standard. So anyway, going into the science part of it, and I'll try to summarize this if I can. So these two scientists, Lee Ross and Andrew Ward, back in 1995, they did this study, and they concluded that most people believe that their ideas and opinions have been arrived at only after very careful thought and study, but actually that isn't true. And then we falsely assume that a simple statement of facts which support our position will fix anyone who disagrees with us. So if I say something on Facebook and someone disagrees with me, I think, well, all I got to do is just say these few things and they'll get it. And I do that, and then they don't. Well, then I'll cut and paste something from a source, and I'll put that in there, or maybe a link to something, a video or a blog. And then that doesn't fix them. And then at the end, I just throw up my hands and I say, those people, they're either idiots, or they're blinded by their worldview, or they're brainwashed, or maybe they're even a subversive agent who is opposed to the truth, right?
Right.
And because I can't think of any other reason why they wouldn't see the truth or admit that I'm right? Because, of course, all I'm doing is giving them very well thought out, simple truth. Why can't you just see the truth? But see, the thing is, they're doing the same thing to me. They're cutting and pasting from their sources and wanting me to understand why they're sensible and they're right and their ideas are so, well thought out and based only on objective reality and truth. But I'm not reading theirs. Why would I bother to read their crap, right? Because they're obviously wrong. And so at the end, we just end up unfriending one another and we're done, right? But the point that they're trying to make, though, is that we all do this, right? Okay, we all behave this way. And once you realize that, then when you're in the middle of one of these arguments on Facebook, you can hopefully take a step back and say, oh, that's what's happening here. We're not really listening to each other.
And I think for me, I've definitely been guilty of that and just in my own journey. And then you start to realize, like when you realize that we don't have an agenda, again, going back to Derek Webb's interview, what I appreciate about it is like to detach from the agenda. All we're trying to do is to speak or tell reality as we've seen it from our own experience, from our own vantage point. Again, it's not like, but then it's like, okay, you just put it out there because that's all you can do is you can just share from what you understand, from what your perspective is. And, if somebody is disagreeing with that, I used to be like, oh, take it personally. If you have like if your ego is fragile or if, you could very easily take that personally and say, and I have, oh, well, they're not appreciating what I'm saying or whatever, but that's making meaning, like that's just a meaning I'm attaching. It could just be like, hey, I'm putting my stuff out there. And if someone has pushback, that's fine. Maybe it doesn't resonate with where they are. Maybe I listen to what they say and I go, yeah, I used to think that way. I no longer think that way. Or, hey, it doesn't really resonate. It's totally fine. It doesn't have to mean anything. Right. It's just like, hey, that's out there. Or if someone gets up and is like, yeah, like I'm not really getting anything out of what you're sharing. I actually think I'm going to move on. I'm not going to listen to your podcast. I'm not going to read your book. I'm not going to read your blog, whatever it is. And it's like, hey, I used to take that very personally. Now it's like, you know what? That's totally fine. Like I'm really just here to share my understanding. I mean, we all have a voice and we can share that and let the chips fall. There's no attachment. It's not good or bad when someone walks away or when they receive it.
But the problem is if someone just quietly on their own read what you said or read your post and then just quietly to themselves said, I don't agree with Jamal. I think I'm going to stop reading his stuff. And then they just stopped reading your stuff. Again, like you said, no big deal. The problem is when they read your stuff and they say, I don't agree with him. Yeah. Let me now post something about why he's horrible and awful and evil and he's a false teacher and people should stay away from him. You know what I mean? And they make then now there's these. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's an accusation that's not. Because I think people sometimes are self-aware and they realize if I come across too strong with this accusation, it's going to be too obvious. So I'll just I'll sort of subtly suggest possibly maybe there's something.
That's where it crosses the line. That's like sinister there.
Yeah.
Well, I think, but it's so typical. I mean, read the book of Job, right? Job's friends show up and at first they're pretty benign. And then there starts to get a little more of a chatter of, well, Job, you're doing this and that, or those who, are wicked are going to reap these horrible things. But then it gets it gets less subtle and less subtle and less subtle to where, I mean, Job's accused of withholding, I think, food from poor people and like binding the arms of orphans or something. But the point later, sorry, my memory, I can't ever remember specifics. I remember like the overarching thing and these specifics. I don't know how people rattle off verse after verse.
Maybe.
But anyway, the point stuff. Being like, yeah, the point is that it gets worse and worse. And what starts as good intentions, really, the friends are just going to come help Job and give him some advice. But then it gets worse and worse. And then the whole community turns into this thing that's greater than the sum of its parts, right? It's like which the writer describes as like satanic or Satan. That's how I see the Satan is like, yeah, we're all guilty of this. We all subtly accuse, we all overtly accuse at times. But when we do it in this group, that there's some great danger in that it takes on this other, like this greater than the sum of its parts thing that we call Satan. But I think going back to beliefs and why we do this, Jamal and following up on Derek Webb, like not really caring if people walk out or if they stay or if they don't read our book or our blog, that's cool. But when we attach ourselves to our beliefs, I think that's when we are in danger of becoming the accuser. And so when we attach ourselves to our books and the beliefs in our books or our music and what we're saying in our music, then we can become, not only do we show the fragility of our ego, but then we can become an accuser ourselves. Like, oh, these fucking people are walking away. Fuck them. And they're a bunch of assholes. No, we can't attach ourselves to even our beliefs or the content we create around our beliefs or our worldview or how we're described. We've got to let go of those attachments too. Read my book or don't read my book. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I said that in the last podcast, the live podcast we did, that the realization that I am not my beliefs.
Right.
Because my beliefs change. And, over the last 5 years, 10 years, I've changed my beliefs about a lot of things. To be honest, a couple of the books I wrote a book called The Power of Weakness, and I wrote another book called This Is My Body, which is about ecclesia and the house church stuff. And there's chapters in both of those books that I want to go back and rewrite and change, because I said things in those books that now I don't believe. So I'm not. So you have to detach yourself from your beliefs, because again, my whole thing is we're all in process. I think I know I am anyway, and so I don't want to hold too tightly to what I believe at the moment, because I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before, and I'll probably be wrong again.
There's, I think, for me personally, just speaking personally, whenever there's overt, like outright, just like if someone like accused me of being a bank robber, that's just ridiculous. I kind of laugh. Or someone says, Jamal, you have no regard for, we're going to get into this in the next topic, but they're like, you're just a sexist, Jamal. Like, I just laugh at that. Like, okay. I mean, I don't take it serious, but I don't like to jump in on that in the sense of like feeling like I have to defend that, because it's just like, really, you want me to prove I'm not a bank robber? But it's the subtle. This is what the more sinister. And I think in the religious world, in the Christians, like I think if they speak any language, it's the art of the subtle accusation. And the subtle accusation is, well, it's just your flesh. This is your, gosh, you have, it's very clear that you are speaking from a wounded ego, which may be true. It may not be true, but that's not your call to make. Number one, that's judgment. That's a judgment. Jesus was very clear in the way of Jesus, judge not. That's not what you do. That's not your role. We do not judge. It's the whole tree of the knowledge of good and evil, always judging between good and evil. This is good. This is evil. This is good. You don't do that. So the thing is, it's that subtle, it's the art of the subtle accusation. And it sounds dressed up. It's like dressed up in religious garb. It's dressed up in noble speak. But at the root of it, it is just as sinister, because you're bringing an accusation, and nobody can bring an accusation against anybody. Who can, even the scripture talks about that. Who can bring an accusation? If God is for you, who can be against you? Who can bring an accusation against the elect, which we all are?
Yes. Yeah. And I think, I feel the same way about shame. I think it's very similar too. I have a friend, or a couple of friends actually, who will constantly say things like, shame on you, shame on you. And it really pisses me off. I just want to say, no shame on me. I'm sorry. I'm in Christ. And those who are in Christ, there is no condemnation. Christ took that shame off of me. And how dare you as a brother or sister in Christ try to put it back on me? No, there is no shame on me. And then there's no accusation either. We shouldn't deal with each other like that. That's not the way we should interact with one another. It's not to bring any accusation against one another, because we recognize all that's been removed.
Oh, but it's so easy. I mean, it's so subtle sometimes and non-conscious. Yes. I was tucking my daughter into bed the other night, and I said something to her, calling her out on something that she had done. And it's like, only once I said that to her did I realize I had done the same shit earlier. And it was, it was like, I assumed, oh, you need to do this, sweetheart, because this is the right thing to do. And I don't even remember what the topic was, but it was like, it's like when the cock crows 3 times before Peter. Light bulb goes off. Fuck, I did that. And I don't think Peter said that, but that's Matt's.
Well, he did first.
Yeah, Peter was a fisherman, man. Come on, I'm sure he had salty language.
Right. but it's just so subtle, Keith. You know, it's like, but we got to recognize this. We got to recognize when we're doing it. It's like, I've done it. I've recognized it when I was subtly gossiping about someone, and I realized, oh, this person that I'm talking with, that I'm gossiping with, oh, we're getting kind of close. You know, we're getting kind of friendly with each other because we're able to say, oh, this person over there, they did this and that, and it brings this unifying, this sense of cohesion, right. It's
like
all magnetic, right. But it's so subtle, it's so non-conscious. We're walking around. That's what's so crazy about all this. It's like we don't even realize we've done it until after we've done it, and then we're able to look and say, "Oh shit, that's what I was doing," and I didn't even see it at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing too. Where like if we think about someone that you really dislike, right, or something you really dislike about some person, a particular person, I've done this where I'll start reflecting on it and realize, you know what, the thing I don't like about them, the thing that really bugs me the most about them, you know why it bothers me? Because I'm the same damn way.
Right.
I feel the same way. You know what I mean? Like maybe they do it worse than I do, or they do it in a way that's more obvious. Like I'm better at hiding it.
Sure.
But that's what bothers me about them and being around them is what's happening is they are a constant reminder to me of my weakness and my flaws. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that. You know?
Yeah. So here's something that I think is important. Like, so how do we? Okay. So I think the question is, how do you deal? Because I don't think there's a human being that's listening to this podcast that is not going to deal with this issue of accusation. You don't have to be a public person. You don't have to be a writer or a podcaster or whatever to experience accusation. We all experience it at every level.
And we all accuse.
And we all accuse.
And we do both.
And there's a voice in our head that's constantly accusing us. That's always questioning your worth, always questioning your, whatever it is. And it's something we deal with internally. So the question is, when it's coming from another person, how do you deal with accusation on a personal level? Like, because I think there's a personal way to deal with it, and then I think there's a more corporate way to deal with it. That's my So for me personally, I feel like in order to forgive, because it's really important. Like, I think all of us, everybody that's listening to this, like, nobody doesn't have to wrestle with forgiveness at some level. We've all been hurt. And so, like, I really feel like Jesus, obviously being the standard, he's the standard bearer. So on the cross, I mean, the accusation that came at this man to even lead to that is astronomical. Like, it's unbelievable, the kind of accusation that happened. And so, like, he's being accused, he's being murdered. So he's being nailed to the cross. And so, like, what will keep his spirit alive in the sense of not sinking into bitterness? What is going to keep this man flowing with love? It is because at a personal level, he understands they don't know what they're doing. So he's able to say, this is not their intent. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Because ultimately, an accuser, somebody who is bringing accusation, they don't understand what they're saying, and it's coming from pain. Even the people bringing the accusation against Jesus, I guarantee you, if you want to get into the psychology of it, there's real pain and fear.
Right. Oh yes.
So it's not to minimize. I mean, I don't think you're saying like you guys don't matter, your pain doesn't matter. So like at a personal level, you forgive, but then at a corporate level, I also see Jesus exposing the Satan, exposing not on a person. He's not like making a person the scapegoat. He's not like he was being scapegoated, so he's not like scapegoating them back, but he is highlighting the broader conversation of, or the broader element of the system of Satan, the system of accusation. And that's why I do think, and then when people operate in it, he would say, get behind me, Satan, even to his own friend or to the Pharisees when he'd be like, you brood of vipers, or which is pretty,
you have the father of the devil,
but I think that's, I think those are some things to understand. And like, I do feel like there's a real lack of discernment specifically in the Christian world of like being able to really correctly discern what is an accusation. And I think we all know what it is when it comes against you. Like, you can feel it in your spirit. It's like sucks the life out of you. It actually feels like death when it comes at you because it is death.
Yeah. But I think it's then important to be like Jesus and remove the intent from the action, and to also say, like, to expose it, yes, but to say, to talk about it in such a way like Paul did, like it's a power and principality. It's something that, you know, he says, I don't do what I want to do and I do what I don't want to do. You know, that's how he talks about the will, and that we are enslaved, and we need to see this, this enslaving mechanism as something that's over us. So we got to remember not to think that someone's always acting out of their own malicious will, or to say, oh, this person's just whatever the things we've been called or have called others, you know, wolf in sheep. This is this person. This is their intent because I saw this action. And it's like, no, we need to talk about these things as these overarching principles so that we can remove the intent from action and then freely offer forgiveness. So that's what Jesus did. And I think that's what Paul did for the most part. I mean, he didn't do it on the cross. But you know, Jesus, like you said, he's the standard bearer, and yes, he calls it out, but at the end of the day, like the moving parts within these systems that we have, they don't know what they're doing, and we don't know what we're doing, which is why we all need grace, you know?
Yeah, I think we have to, I think it has to start with, it totally is to me, the whole thing about, you know, I'm very, very aware of other people's flaws. I'm not very aware of my own, or if I am, I bury it a little bit. So it's totally the speck in my brother's eye, which is so obvious to me, in the beam that's invisible in my own eye.
Right.
So I think it starts with, you know, how do we deal with accusations? Well, start with myself. Like, in what ways do I accuse other people, and in what ways do I prejudge them? And I'll be honest with you guys. I think this is true. I don't typically accuse people on social media, on Facebook. Like if someone's coming at me, I don't do a tit for tat thing. I don't come back at them with like, well, you're probably blah, blah, blah. But I don't in the comments, but in my mind,
right,
or in my heart, I probably do say that guy is just an ass, right? Or this guy is just, you know, in other words, I create a model in my mind of what's wrong with that person.
Right.
And I create this and I judge them, right? And in my mind and my heart, I am accusing them of some things.
Right.
So I think it has to start with us first. Social media makes it really hard. I think Facebook especially makes it really hard once this accusation thing starts happening. And so they accuse you of something and you feel defensive, and then you're trying to, what do you do? How do I respond? Do I ignore it? Do I try to address it? Do whatever? I mean, it's a no-win situation. And you know, what I've tried to do, sometimes I'll just try to private message that person and just go, you know, like, hey man, hey brother, hey sister, I saw you made that comment that really bothered me. You know, can we talk? Or if I can we Skype? Can we actually have a conversation about this? Like and I've even told some people, I am not going to deal with you any further until we talk about this. Unless you're able to come on and talk to me about it on the phone or on Skype, we're done. I'm not going to pursue this anymore. Did you guys see, I think someone shared it in the Facebook group, that whole thing Sarah Silverman did, where this guy called her a cunt. And her response was,
thank you. I was waiting for that.
I'm just quoting what he said. And her response was the most Christ-like thing I've ever seen in my life, to just totally, you know, say, hey, I know you're coming from a place of pain, and where does that come from? And she drew the guy out. He confessed his situation, his pain, some of what, you know, the root of it. She, you know, found out he had back problems. She rallied people in San Antonio, where he was from, to give him, help him with some therapy. And he apologized, of course. But what's funny is he didn't apologize to like 10 things down the line. He did not immediately apologize, but eventually he did and say, hey, I'm sorry, I said that to you. But anyway, the resolution of this thing was this beautiful Christ-like picture of someone who, I'm pretty sure Sarah Silverman is not a Christian. Maybe she is. But at the same time, what an amazing example of, well, if there's a typical example of, that's a beautiful way to address someone who is accusing you of something or attacking you in some way, of like drilling down into that person. Who are they? What is their pain? Let's just ignore anything and everything they say about me personally. Let's just drive down into like seek healing for that other person. Now that takes time and energy. And frankly, that's really hard to do on a regular basis. But I do think that's a great example of how we could respond in a way that could arrive at some healing.
I wish I did that more often.
Well, I think it's a matter of discernment. So, for example, like this, that's a response to accusation,
Right.
but I don't know that it's the response because, and I think there's this idea out there that is like, well, that's the way Jesus would respond 100% of the time. And he didn't, he just didn't. And he like there were times I think he probably did do that, but like we just going from the canonical gospels that we have, it's like, we have, this example of highlighting the essence of it, because sometimes when someone's coming at you with accusation, you're not actually even speaking to that person because it's actually not the person speaking. It is this kind of this overarching spirit of that really is built from, the foundation of it is coming from a faulty identity. And so like, so when someone's speaking that language, you to reason with that, oftentimes it's like you giving somebody bullets for the gun they're going to shoot you with. And that's often what happens. Well, and that's what happened that's why I think Jesus, many of the times when these accusations were coming before his crucifixion, he just was silent. Like he was very quiet, because there was no reasoning with those people in that sense. So I think it is a matter of discernment.
Well, but I don't think anyone's saying like what Sarah Silverman did was reasoning. Like she was just actually just loving. Like the reason was that's kind of unreasonable. What she did does sound unreasonable because
she had a dialogue.
She probably read
with him, obviously. But I guess
sure, but
it's a approach. It's not, to me, it's not the approach because I've done that.
Yeah,
and it's not.
Sure.
I've tried as well. I've had some times. I'll be honest. I've never had the storybook ending that she had, but I have had occasions when someone is like just really unreasonably attacking me and coming at me and calling me names and all that kind of stuff, just like over the top. Where I have been able to just like respond in the most gushy, loving, God bless you, brother way, and no matter what they say, I'm just blessing them and blessing them and blessing them, and they will eventually. I mean, again, they don't turn around and go, "Oh, Keith, I'm sorry, man. Let's be bros." But they have at least stopped attacking me, and because like they're just tired of everything they say, I just come back at them with a blessing. There's like, oh well, you're not going to play ball with me. You're not going to give me what I want. You're not giving me the reaction I want. I'll go somewhere else. But sometimes it does work. I agree with you, Jamal, in one sense that I don't think there's in general, I don't think that we should look for formulas.
Right.
I think we do look for formulas. Oh, and if this ever happens, do this. We do formulas in prayer. We do formulas in evangelism. We do formulas in, we just want a formula, but God is not a formula. God doesn't work that way, right? God wants us. Everything is unique, and every situation is unique. So I agree with you in that sense that maybe with a particular person, maybe the best thing to do is just walk away because they're not gonna back down.
And here's a practical question.
Right.
Just more of a practical thing to think about. It's like, okay, so there's a difference between accusation and disagreement. So like people can disagree with our positions or things we're saying, but it doesn't mean they're accusing you. So here's the I think the $1 million question, because obviously we're having a conversation about deconstruction, reconstruction. We are challenging firmly entrenched belief systems, and so that's not going away anytime soon. So the question is, how can we disagree with each other and even challenge some of our thinking and ideas without actually resorting to accusation, which it so often happens? Like, so how can we not accuse, even subtly or overtly, and yet still maybe even push back against ideas and things that we're saying?
Yeah, well, I think we have to do exactly what you said. We have to believe the best of people, assume the best of people, and discuss concepts and discuss ideas without resorting to getting personal.
Yeah. And I think we have to, when we question each other, I think we have to ask really open-ended questions.
Yes.
Any closed-ended questions, yes or no questions, up and down questions, left and right, black and white, those questions, they have their purpose. Do I take a right here or do I take a left here, honey? Or, things like that. But when we're asking the deeper questions of life, the existential questions, the cultural questions, the theological, we've got to be really open-ended in our questioning of others, because when we have some intent and some implied intent in our wording, maybe, or we're asking, Keith, why are you a fucking asshole? It's like, well, or are you a fucking asshole? No, but I've implied that you are when I ask you that.
Right.
And if Keith answered that,
I think we need to be.
Why are you so defensive about that, Keith?
Sure.
I'm sorry. You just. Well, that's exactly what happens, right? Then they accuse you, and then no matter what you say, pretty much, it's like, oh, man, you're so defensive. I must have touched a nerve, bro, because there, you responded like it was so much passion, even if like there's no passion at all in what you said. You just create your own narrative.
Well,
yeah. That's why I always just go towards the open-ended questions rather than the closed-ended questions.
That's a great.
That's what I've learned.
A great point, Matt. That's a really great point. And I have figured this one out. Now, that statement alone is like, if somebody's like operating in some accusation, they're going to come at me like, that Jamal is such an arrogant ass, but like, no, I seriously have figured this one out. So here's the thing. How do you respond? How do you disagree with that accusation? I really feel like it all hinges upon how we view our own nature, our own heart. And what came, like I was having this dialogue recently with a person and we were obviously disagreeing, and there was subtle and not so subtle accusations being thrown at me in the conversation. And I said, so my only response was, and it was like, hey, look, like they were trying to like say, hey, can't you see, like you're messed up? Can't you see blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know what? I'm not saying I don't have, areas to grow or whatever, but I know my heart and I know my motivation and I know my heart. And my heart is actually really good. And when I said that, the response was, that's disgusting. You are egotistical. You are this. And to me, it's like, there's the reason that you can't see the accusation, because when you believe something negative about yourself, when you personally believe, if you believe that saying that your heart is good is actually disgusting, that's what you're operating from. And so that's an accusation against your own nature. That's an accusation against your own character, your own person. So if you believe in your own inherent goodness, then you cannot accuse another person who is just like you. In that sense, you cannot bring accusation against other good people if you actually believe that people are fundamentally good and have beautiful hearts. You can't do it. It's impossible. And I think it's really coming back down to that.
How can you believe the best about someone if you don't believe the best about yourself and you assume that there's nothing good in them either? So you're definitely not assuming the best of the other person. And like you said, you're kind of projecting on the other person, your own negative feelings about yourself and all that.
Well, and my goodness, we are made in the image and likeness of God. Our will, our freed will is, as David Bentley Hart says, primordially and teleologically oriented toward the good. That means from our starting place to our ending place and our purpose, it is good. It is going towards an ending that is good because it's from a creator who is good. And we are not just these autonomous things. We have the spark of the divine in us. So our very nature, this whole Augustinian original sin bullshit doctrine needs to go. Like we are good. We are made in God's image, and God is good. So that's where we're from. That's our connection is to that good divine source. Where else is there?
You're like a divine being.
That's it.
Imagine that.
That's it.
We're like humanity and divinity all in one person.
Yeah, we're like the incarnation of Christ in the world, where Christ is in me and Christ is in you. And you know what, guys, I was thinking that we need to do a whole podcast just on what we just ended with here, because I think this is such a key thing, man. I think so many Christians, they don't believe in their heart that they are good or that Christ could make them someone
how are we like
who is
God?
good.
How are we like?
Yeah, we got to do that.
We're like God.
Yeah, we got to do that.
You're like God.
But I think we're out of time for this one.
We're out of time. So yeah, next episode, Gender Wars, Amanda Iosa, Jory Micah, Heretic of the Week. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and don't forget, because we have the Heretic hotline that's available.
It is.
What is the number?
It is always open.
2403 Heresy.
That's right. Operators are standing by.